afternoon. It's Tuesday, March 22nd. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. World leaders condemned today's terror attacks in Brussels, with European leaders declaring war on terror after dozens of casualties were reported in the series of bombings that struck Brussels airport and the city's metro stations. The casualty toll is expected to rise and currently stands at 34. IBA's Margot Dudkevich has this report.
Belgium raised its terror threat to the highest level today after a series of deadly explosions rocked the country's capital, killing and injuring scores. Brussels went on lockdown and authorities shut down the airport, all the city's public transport services, museums and universities. The European Union evacuated all its buildings, and the Eurostar railway also suspended train services to and from Brussels. In a ripple effect, countries suspended their flights to Belgium and raised the level of alert along their borders. In Israel, in an unprecedented step, and at the advice of the security establishment, all flights from Europe to Israel were suspended until midnight. At Ben Gurion Airport, a situation room was opened in order to update passengers and members of the public concerning outgoing and incoming flights. The Foreign Ministry opened its situation room to determine whether any Israelis were among the injured. Belgian authorities said two explosions at Brussels International Airport, in which at least 13 people were killed and scores injured, were carried out by suicide bombers. Initial reports said one explosion occurred inside the airport's departure terminal near an American Airlines counter. A second blast occurred underneath the terminal in the metro station where a train pulled in. Shortly after, additional explosions were reported at the Malbec metro station, located in a city neighborhood known to be a hotbed for Islamic extremism, and located several hundred meters from European Union institutions. Initial reports said at least 10 people were killed and dozens wounded. Explosions were reported in at least two other metro stations in the city. The deadly attacks in Brussels occurred just days after Belgian security forces arrested Saleh Abdel Salam, one of Europe's most wanted terrorists responsible for the deadly attacks in Paris in November, in which 130 people were killed. Today's wave of terror attacks serves as a wake-up call to Europe, who is already finding it hard to cope with constant terror threats. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
Commenting on this morning's terror attacks in Brussels, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini called it a sad day for Europe. She made the comments during a press conference with the Jordanian Foreign Minister.
It's quite clear that the roots of the pain we are suffering around our region are very much the same, and that we are united in not only suffering our victims, but also reacting to these acts and preventing radicalization and violence together.
A short while ago, IBA News interviewed Robbie Spiegel, a resident of Brussels, who spoke about the general atmosphere in the city and the effect on the Jewish community.
So I just left my home to go to the office here. So of course, all the authorities, they ask the people to stay at home, not to move. We have been told that there are two cars for the moment with terrorists with Kalashnikov on the car. We don't know. So we see a lot of military people and policemen. I would say that there is no traffic here. A lot of streets are completely closed to the cars, near the Rue de la Loi, where was the explosion.
There must be a sense of fear among everybody there, no?
Yeah, exactly. Because just when I arrived at the office is just in the center of Brussels, and the office is just in the center of Brussels, here near the Palace of Justice. So they all told me that I'm crazy, that I was crazy to come to the office. But anyhow, exactly, there is a question of fear, exactly. But people they want to go home.
Do you think that they're targeting maybe the Jewish community?
For the moment, we think that it's something similar to what occurred in Paris last year. and but so everybody is targeted. In fact, everybody, and that's exactly the fear that the people have exactly here. We don't feel that it's against the Jewish population, but I'm sure that, for example, tomorrow we have like a small concert for Purim in the great synagogue. I'm quite sure that they will cancel the event. I'm quite sure.
Dr. Amira Halpern, expert on radicalization in Europe, thank you for joining us today on IBA News. We witnessed yet another terror attack today, this time in Brussels. It seems to have been a well-orchestrated and well-planned attack. How long would it take to plan such an attack and put it in action?
I believe that this attack, like any other previous attacks in London a few years ago and in Paris, it takes few years, it's very well planned, and basically they have all the resources they need inside Europe because they operate inside Europe with global cooperation, and they have what they need because also they know the area very well, they've been inside, and they collect the money and they collect the weapons that they need. So they need a lot of time, but everything is very well planned.
There are reports that the fugitive arrested by Belgian security forces several days ago warned police of an imminent attack in the country. If this is true, why did the Belgian authorities fail to act?
As I say, I believe it's the same like the previous attacks that we saw in the UK, in Paris and other countries in Europe, that the police is very cautious about going into mosque and making arrests because it's a political, it might be a cause to political failure. The Muslim community creates a very big political power in Europe, so it's very problematic to do it directly, to go in and to do the raids. And as intelligence officers say, it's very difficult.
What is the likelihood that the Islamic State is behind these attacks?
It's very high, but I believe since what I saw 10 years ago, what I saw in the UK when I did my research there, and I saw the other terrorists and the other groups there, the thinking is quite the same and the ideology is quite the same, and we don't see here a difference in the type of the attack. I mean, it might be this time it might be the ISIS, it's a different name, but the extreme Islamists are there, and they share the same ideology and the same resources to commit these attacks.
Amira, are there any assessments concerning the number of Islamic State or other terror cells that are currently operating in Europe?
It's very difficult to assess because every day new young people join in, and we can see inside the mosque that many people come in and they hear these preachers to carry out terrorist attack. So the number is really growing. And these people really join the jihad, and sometimes it's not even for a reason. It's just because they are very enthusiastic about it and they believe that they should join it too. So the numbers are growing. I don't know the estimate number at the moment, but it's a big phenomenon in Europe, certainly.
In the past year, there were numerous terror attacks in Europe, and hundreds of people were killed. Do you think the Europeans are waking up to the fact that they have to start clamping down on terrorists and on terrorism? I think
they understand that they have to change the reality, but they're still very cautious about it, and they still don't do enough because they have now the big problem with the new wave of immigrants, and they still have to decide whether they want to take in these immigrants as a whole, as a community, or whether they have to differentiate between the people there and then to adopt a new policy. So it's still very big measures that they have to do, and they didn't do it yet.
You spoke about the Syrian migrants, for example, and the large Muslim population living in the country. How can the authorities screen for possible terror elements? What can they do?
I believe that if they see and they know about it, they should really stop it, because sometimes they just ignore it and they let people like extreme Islamists to do what they do for many years, and they just don't do anything about it, just because of a policy. So what they do is they must be much more aggressive. They must go in the mosque and stop this activity. They must go to, if you go even to universities, you see these Islamist cells inside the universities, you see the leaflets they give. I mean, it's very open. You can see it in the main streets of London and Paris and Belgium, you can see it. So what they have to do, it's not very difficult to do, but they have to really develop their, to reassess their thinking, I believe, towards this radicalization problem.
One last quick question. Is it possible that decades from now the Muslim population in Europe will exceed the number of Europeans?
Might be the case, but I believe that also we have to separate between the Muslim community, the moderate so-called Muslim people that are trying to fight against radicalization. And I believe that if in a few years from now or in a decade from now, the Muslim community will be able to get over the challenge of connecting Islam to radicalization, that would be a big achievement.
Dr. Amira Halpern, thanks so much for being our guest this evening.
Thank you very much.
In other news, Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump pledged his support for Israel, vowed to dismantle the Iranian nuclear deal, and promised, if elected president, he would move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Speaking before the annual American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee meeting, Trump, known for his usual off-the-cuff comments, delivered a carefully scripted speech. I speak to you today as a lifelong supporter and true friend of Israel. I'm a newcomer to politics, but not to backing the Jewish state, he said.
The United Nations is not a friend of democracy. It's not a friend to freedom. It's not a friend even to the United States of America, where, as you know, it has its home. And it surely is not a friend to Israel. When I'm president, believe me, I will veto any attempt by the UN to impose its will on the Jewish state. It will be vetoed 100%. The Palestinians must come to the table knowing that the bond between the United States and Israel is absolutely, totally unbreakable. They must come to the table willing and able to stop the terror being committed on a daily basis against Israel. They must do that. We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
Hours before his appearance at AIPAC, Donald Trump succeeded in raising a few eyebrows when he told reporters that as president, he would require Israel to pay the United States for the foreign aid packages it receives.
At many of your rallies, you've announced countries that we send foreign aid to that can defend themselves, such as Germany, Japan, and South Korea.
Yeah, I don't denounce the country. I have great respect for those countries. I want them to pay us some money.
Right. Should that same standard apply to Israel?
I think Israel will do that also, yeah.
Democratic presidential frontrunner Hillary Clinton used the opportunity to attack Donald Trump, saying his neutral stance in the search for peace between Israel and the Palestinians is dangerous for Israel. Clinton told the pro-Israel AIPAC lobby that Iran still poses a threat to Israel and must be monitored closely. Critics said Clinton took every position AIPAC expects from its political allies, but she did not call to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. However, Clinton said as president, one of the first things she would do in office is to invite Israel's prime minister to the White House.
Yes, we need steady hands, not a president who says he's neutral on Monday, pro-Israel on Tuesday, and who knows what on Wednesday, because everything's negotiable. Well, my friends, Israel's security is non-negotiable. That America can't ever be neutral when it comes to Israel's security or survival. We can't be neutral when rockets rain down on residential neighborhoods, when civilians are stabbed in the street, when suicide bombers target the innocent. Some things aren't negotiable. And anyone who doesn't understand that has no business being our president. It's not good enough to trust and verify. Our approach must be distrust and verify. This deal must come with vigorous enforcement, strong monitoring, clear consequences for any violations, and a broader strategy to confront Iran's aggression across the region. We cannot forget that Tehran's fingerprints are on nearly every conflict across the Middle East, from Syria to Lebanon to Yemen.
Lenny Ben-David, former director of the AIPAC office in Israel, says the AIPAC policy conference gave U.S. presidential candidates a global stage to deliver their views. Democratic Party frontrunner Hillary Clinton and Republican Donald Trump took advantage of this. He was speaking with IBA's Ari O'Sullivan.
Her speech was very pro-Israel, as were all the others, and it does set down markers of where their policy is headed, and the AIPAC conference, therefore, has to be understood in a broader picture of where the future of United States Middle East policy will be.
Looking at Donald Trump, he gave his speech as well, and people are saying, analysts are saying that the AIPAC maybe kosherized him, made him a real candidate, if he wasn't already.
He kosherized himself, leaving aside the children, and how ironic that Bernie Sanders is the Jewish candidate, is the only one who doesn't have Jewish grandchildren. Leaving aside that issue, the fact is they all have to focus on Middle East policy when they come to AIPAC. And Mr. Trump hasn't focused on foreign policy. He hasn't written out a foreign policy speech until this. Similarly, with whether you go with Cruz or with Kasich or even Hillary, they had to turn to their Middle East policy experts and say, write this down. And as a result, we have an outline of foreign policy in the Middle East, which is a foreign policy of change.
Do you think AIPAC is still relevant?
8 months ago, people were claiming that AIPAC lost this major fight, was going the way of the dodo bird, proclaiming that it was a train wreck. And I actually wrote then and said, no, just the opposite. AIPAC is coming back stronger, and they certainly did. And the support for AIPAC has grown, and you saw it in this conference in Washington. It wasn't just to AIPAC that these people are speaking. When you realize that the speeches were being broadcast on CNN, C-SPAN, Fox News, streaming live around the world, this AIPAC conference had a global audience. And I'm sure there were a lot of Middle East analysts in this region who are also watching to see, is AIPAC still strong? And the answer is yes.
All the presidential candidates spoke there except for Bernie Sanders. Is that going to harm him?
Sanders spoke, and his criticism of Israel is being picked up. Where did he speak? In Utah, one of the most pro-Israel states in the United States, I believe. So it's not going to hurt him, it's not going to help him, because I think Bernie Sanders has run his course. Moreover, he didn't have the audience of Washington. And again, it's not just a narrow audience of 18,000, it's an audience of millions. And every member of Congress will watch and see what's going on. I'll just remind people, as a little bit of a dig, Sanders was asked who his advisors are. And he named among his Middle East advisors an organization called J Street and the head of the Arab American lobby, a man named Jim Zogby. And so I guess his advisors had him stay away from AIPAC.
Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah warned that his organization's missiles are capable of targeting any point in Israel, including its petrochemical plants, biological research institutes, and nuclear reactors. Nasrallah, who made the comments in a televised interview on Monday, said there are no red lines when it comes to attacking Israel, and if a war breaks out in the future, Hezbollah will strike back. Hezbollah has all the details of the locations of petrochemical, biological, and nuclear facilities in Palestine, he said. Nasrallah asserted that while Hezbollah is not seeking a war with Israel, it does not grant Israel any security guarantees. Since the outbreak of the current round of violence last October, 33 people, including Israelis and foreigners, were killed, and 355 people were injured in vehicular, stabbing, and shooting attacks. These were the statistics released by Magen David Adom. 37 people suffered serious injuries, 9 were listed with moderate to serious injuries, 56 were moderately injured, and the rest suffered light injuries. According to the organization, paramedics treated 123 people who suffered from shock. In local money matters, shares were down on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, while the shekel was up in foreign currency trading. Here are the late afternoon numbers. Turning to the forecast, an IBA's weather team says temperatures are expected to rise tomorrow, becoming unseasonably warm and dry in most parts of the country with partly cloudy skies. Here are the highs and lows. And that's all for this newscast. Ari O'Sullivan will be here tomorrow, same time, same channel. Make sure to join him. I'm Laura Cornfield, wishing you a good evening and shalom from Jerusalem. Pupils who went to school dressed up in their Purim costumes.